My name is Juliette Carrillo, and I'm the director of Mojada by Luis Alfaro.
My name is Luis Alfaro, and I'm the playwright of Mojada. Mojada is an adaptation of the Greek classic Medea, and I've done a modern day version, still a journey play. Medea is now Medea, Jason is now Hasson, and it's all really the same beats of the original Greek myth, but I've placed it in a big American city, and it is a story of what happens to these immigrants who come to this strange land and how they have to adjust to their life here and all the sort of circumstances that happened to them before they arrived and how they carry that into their experience of living in the United States. How I fell into the adaptation of these Greek plays is that I do these community, you could say I get community interventions around the country as part of my theatrical work. And the first one happened in Tucson, Arizona, where I actually met a young woman who mirrored Electra's story, murdered her mother to avenge her father's death, a modern day tale, right? And then I read the original Greek story and I thought, oh my God, this is the same story, and have we not in some way evolved as a civilization since then? And so I just tried to adapt it beat per beat, and I had great success with it, and it's gone up to like 30-something productions. And then they always kind of start with the story, as the Greeks do as well, and the Electra story really is, can we ever forgive? And then I fell into the Oedipus story, and the Oedipus story seemed to apply itself to what's going on in our prison system, in our modern American prison system, which has now become a big business, right? And so where are the new kingdoms? And where are these young kings? And they're all in prison. And so that sort of became that story. And with Medea, it was really about what is the price we pay when we come to a new country? And how does it really work? What are the dynamics for us? So I really, they kind of fell into themselves, So I try to let the community tell me, and usually the community will tell me in one way or another. So in the Electra, it was very easy, and in the Oedipus, it was very easy because I just started to interview young men out of Homeboy Industries, which is a gang prevention center. So there was an Oedipus in there who told me his story, and I thought, oh my God, this is the Oedipus, right? And the same thing with this story. There's a journey in my play. And that journey is actually a real person's journey. So I really started to feed how to write the play.
Luis and I have known each other for a very, very long time. But we're not that old. And we worked together. We did a workshop years ago, but we really haven't had much opportunity to work together doing full productions. And so this is long overdue. And we're really excited. I think it's, bringing my aesthetic and his aesthetic together. I think it's going to be a really interesting journey. Yeah. So I'm thrilled. I'm honored and super excited to be working on the show. My personal immigrant experience is that even though I'm third generation, I was an immigrant of sorts because my family went back to Mexico. And I lived there as a child because they were interested in connecting to roots and ancestral connections, right? So my father started an art center in Baja California, and I came back to the United States in first grade, and so I had an immigrant experience where I had to kind of let go of my past in Mexico and embrace what the future was bringing to me, which was there was a certain pressure to assimilate and to stop speaking Spanish and to become American in order to really survive in the culture. And so I definitely identify with that experience that Medea goes through. Really everybody in that family goes through.
One of the joys of the Greeks is, that every character becomes a kind of, probably a metaphor for something larger, right? So Medea for me represents the immigrant experience, the journey play, right? The very complicated person who comes to this country with a dream of how they might live here, but also compromised by so many things that happen, not only on your journey, but once you get here. So I wanted to write not an old, shrewish Medea that we could all hate from the get go, but write a Medea that we actually might like, that we might actually understand to some degree, right? So I wanted a beautiful Medea. I wanted a young Medea. I wanted someone whose ideals and sense of what she believed in still were very, very real and true and attainable, right? So I think there's something about, oh, when we write these stories, sometimes we already like know who our villain is. And one of the things I'm trying to do in this play is see if the villains are actually maybe victims themselves. So everybody who seems villainous in this play might actually be our protagonist, right? Which would be really exciting to be confused that way by people's hopes and dreams, right? So Medea, I think, represents for me kind of a whole class of people in this country. Really a kind of extraordinary person who works really, really hard at what they do and is trying to hold on to something. And in this case, I think culture, a sense of community, a sense of self, and not lose it as they navigate the waters of what it means to be an American citizen. So, one of the joys that I have in creating characters is also trying to find where the character represents the audience, right? So, in the Greeks give us a kind of unique opportunity because they have a chorus, and the chorus sometimes is composed of many people, or sometimes a singular character. And in this case, the character of Tita is the chorus. But also, I think that each character represents a part of the audience, right? The assimilated part of the audience, the ambitious one, the one who lives merely through love, and every character has a different sort of, I think, part of ourselves attached to them. And I love when the audience can find themselves in each story. And so what I'm trying to do with this play, maybe it's a little bit too ambitious, but it's exciting, is that I might see myself in every character, that every character represents some part of my journey, my family's journey in this country, right? Whether you've been here for many, many generations, I think you might see a part of yourself in how communities are built, how stories are made, right? How families exist. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is let you find yourself in every single character, right? So hopefully it's not that all our senior patrons only relate to the senior character, but actually I think they might relate more fully to that young, ambitious guy who's trying to make something of himself, which is a generation, that definitely existed in this country, that was really proactive in terms of trying to make their way in the world. And so I think there's something very exciting about when we can see ourselves in the least likely character.
It's a very universal story in that way.
Yeah.
It's like the experience of trying to make it, trying to fit in, trying to be somebody in this country, whether you're an immigrant or not, is just kind of an American experience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, when I say universal, I think it's universally American. I don't know if other cultures would experience that kind of pressure that we experience as Americans.
Yeah.
To make it. So that's the power, and I think that's what will reach the audience. How we'll reach the audiences is that connection. Yeah.
The only reason to take on the Greek classics is if you're going to really try to reinterpret them in some way. Otherwise, leave them alone because they're perfect, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that if you're really going to try to say something about the time that we're in, and you're using that text to help guide the story, then I think there's something really exciting about, I think, what we're trying to do. And I think we're both very poetic people. I think, we're both very emotional people. I mean, I think the things we share, I think we're going to bring a lot of poetry to this. Mm-hmm. Well, the word mojada is a Spanish word for wetback, which is a derogatory term coined in the 1930s for undocumented people that were crossing over the Rio Grande River. So how interesting, right? I also think it's a word that's existed in my vernacular since I was little, right? So I think it's a word that for me has a lot of resonance. It has a lot of power, in the same way that sometimes I refer to myself as a queer person, I have taken a really awful word and empowered it, shifted it, turned it upside down, and empowered it to something else. In this case, I think that Medea feels like a Mojada. She's treated like a Mojada. She sees how people treat Mojados. So when she takes that word, she uses that word at one point as a way of kind of signifying how corrupt people can be. I think it is taking that word and showing people how ugly it is. What a harsh, awful word. But also, this is a word to describe how you might, in her case, feel about me. Right? So I've had those instances, where I've had somebody say a word to me and I'll say, yeah, that word and its power is holding something. It holds power, right? So I wanted to disarm that word. I wanted for the word to reappropriate itself. I wanted for us to own the word and see how ugly that word is and also give it new meaning. And I think that's the scope of a play like this, right? I'm trying to give new meaning to a word like that. Yeah, so how do we use that word, maybe not to empower necessarily, but how do I use that word to maybe even show you how ugly that word is or how powerful that word is? So I think in a way, I could say, that word, right, and never mention it. But I think it's braver to say, this is the word. This is the story. Also, let's not lie to ourselves. We're not doing, like Color Purple. We're doing Medea, right? So let's not run from the fact that we're doing a very difficult, hard Greek classic that does not end well. So if you come thinking it's going to end well, wash away all those. I promise it'll be fun and it'll be worth your while, but it doesn't end well. We all know that, right? So we all know that. So we're coming to the theater tonight to have catharsis, to have an emotional experience. And it might be a hard experience, but that's what the theater is about, right? So somebody said this recently, which I thought was so beautiful. So films are about stories, television is about characters, and the theater is about ideas. And I think we're wrestling with ideas here. And there is an idea at present in the title of this play that we have to wrestle with tonight. We're going to have to own it, we're going to chew it, and then we're going to spit it out, and it's not going to look the same way. I hope that is what happens, right? That's the hope.